Ein herzliches Willkommen an alle, die uns zuhören. Ich werde jetzt gleich mal auf Englisch umschalten, unserem Gast zuliebe aus Kopenhagen. So, hello and a big welcome to everyone out there. You pressed the right button to listen to Søren Johansen and Johansen Skovsted's lecture tonight as part of the Faculty of Architecture and Landscape in Hanover. So we're happy to welcome all of you here. My name is Bernd Schmutz, and there are probably quite a few people who do not know me. I'm currently guest professor in Hanover, and due to the circumstances of the last months, I hardly managed to set a foot on the beautiful campus that we have. But even more so, I'm really happy tonight to kick off this lecture series and to welcome Søren Johansen from Johansen Skovsted. Hello, Søren.
Hello, Bernd, and hello, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me to present our work. And just to start off, I'm going to tell you a bit about our office. So we are a small office located in Copenhagen. We are at the moment 6 people, and we are in the meat packing district in Copenhagen. Hang on, seems like I can't. Yeah, there we go. So this is our office spaces. So we were founded in 2014, and we have been situated in these spaces ever since. Yeah, the first project that I brought is also the first project that we got in the office. It's called Tipperne, and it's a project that is about opening up an area. I'll just show you here. So this is the Western Jutland next to the Northern Sea. So this laguna is called Ringkøbing Fjord, and Tipperne is this lower part of Ringkøbing Fjord, the peninsula going up into the lower part. And it's actually situated quite close to another project, which is called Skjern, which are these 3 pump stations located here. So, but Tipperne is it's a bird sanctuary, so it's a protected natural habitat for migrating birds, and it has been closed off to the public, so there's not been access except from few selected times for the public, and there was a wish from the nature agency who administrates the area to make the area open to the public partly, and to do that they also needed new facilities, and this was basically the commission that we got. So the area is completely flat like this, so it's in a way, it's a huge landscape. It feels like a big landscape at one time. At the same time, it's also quite a small or intimate landscape, because it is so open that you can see everything. You can see the whole landscape when you're there. And it's level with the sea, so it's flat and it's very low, and it's both the soil is very moist, and also the sky is very moist and dramatic also, because it's so close to the Northern Sea. So you have these very strong atmosphere gusts coming from the Northern Sea, but you don't have the drama of the landscape of the coast, but you have this plain, so you sort of get the sky becomes in a way exposed. So this is what the site looked like before the assignment. There was this tower, which is a relic from the Second World War, which were used by the professional bird counters So I also need to add that the area has been subject to monitoring of birds for a very long time. Actually, it's the longest continuous bird count of any place in Europe. So it's like a gem to the society of people who take care of this. And they have been using this tower from the Second World War to do their observations from, among other things. But we, in order to make the area accessible for visitors, the old tower had to be replaced with a new tower. And we also cleaned up some of the structures that were in the foreground of the pictures you saw before. Then we added a new workshop and a watchtower, and we transformed the Tipper house, which is the house with the thatched roof. And we added also a bird hide, which is separate from the rest of the elements. This is sort of to create a feeling of the elements. Besides from the possibility of getting closer to the wildlife, it's also about creating a feeling of the built elements, that they are more scattered and not so much a part of a settlement. So here you can see this is the Tipper house and workshop. And the Tipper house, the ground floor in the Tipper house, we transformed to accommodate visitors' facilities. We also changed the stair to make accessibility for handicapped. So this is the ground floor of the Tipper house, where we did an exhibition and dining space in one part, and another space on the other side, which is for when you have buses that you can gather a group and make a presentation to tell about the area. And so inside we replaced some the load-bearing walls inside the house with a wooden structure, and we reinforced the walls also by adding a wooden structure that was painted into the color of the walls. The technical installations we painted in a red color to also, maybe you might not be able to see it because of the talking heads, but there's some technical installations on the wall which are monitoring wind and stuff like this that the bird counters has been and are using on the site as part of their work. So we wanted sort of to highlight, bring them to attention. We also did some bespoke furniture. And then we transformed the first floor of the house into sleeping areas for the bird counters and a working space, which is also a library. So we work with this OSB plates, which are, you see here, which has this sort of grainy texture, and painted it with a diluted paint. Also see it here. So these are the alcoves, and in the middle we have this library space, which is basically because these bird counts, they have been going on for a long time, and they are of course before digitalization. So all of the documents are in ring binders. So this space where we were asked to have room for 40 meters of ring binders of all of the observations. So this is what you see. So the first of the freestanding structures that I'm going to show is the workshop, and this takes inspiration from a small settlement which is also in Tipperne. It's just south of the area that we are in, outside the protected area, and this is a hunting village with these small intimistic cabins. And so we did this small structure, which basically houses technical equipment and a workshop, and also a handicap toilet. And it's a structure that it's a wooden structure that is stabilized with the aluminium plates on the inside. and it has light openings for light from glass fiber panels. So basically, you see here in the plan the workshop, the toilet, oil tank, and waste. And the inside is left as untreated aluminium, so it's easy for cleaning. And the next structure is the bird hide, which is the structure which are located separately from the rest of the settlement. And we did dig this small pond, which is actually the whole area is dotted with these small ponds. So it's another one of these, but this is to attract the wildlife to this area. And the water in these ponds, they get this reddish color because there's ochre in the ground. And also, of course, this is also a color in the vegetation. And you see how we try to connect to this tonality of the ground with the structure, which is a cotton steel structure. And it has this small tent-like structure that sort of leans in the direction of the wind in the same way as the bushes. So you see, it's also it's held free of the ground. It has a small area where you can sit covered under a small gutter. But basically, it's a structure, as you see here, of 6 millimeter cotton plates that are joined with the steel profiles and nothing more, basically. So here you can see the elevations and the joints. And so the last structure from this project is the tipper tower, which is, of course, a structure that rises from the ground and we knew would be quite visible on the side from any place in this area. And it was important to us that it didn't break this continuous horizon and the flatness of the area. So we wanted to make a very slender construction where the horizon would pass through. And we also wanted this structure to have sort of a quality where it would react to the very changing light of the atmosphere. So we were looking at different kinds of structures that are known in this area and in the landscape in general. And we found that these steel pylons that are made from solid round steel, they have a slenderness which is different from steel pylons made with the angular steel, because the angular steel has a shadow built into the angle, and the round steel sort of breaks the light in a more soft way. So we looked around in the area to find a manufacturer of this kind of steel, and steel pylons, and we found a factory quite close by called Carl C, where we went to visit, and we learned a lot about their production methods. And actually, we started to develop our design based on their manufacturing methods. So this is an early sketch of the tower, and we learned many things throughout the process. It took 5 years to complete this project, and this is not because it's a tiny project, and you might wonder why it would take so long time, but this is because it's the area is so delicate. So it was a long process to get permits to do these things. So, but what we learned during the process is that the tower had to house this telescope, which is quite large, 2.2 meters, and the tower also had to have exactly the same qualities and lacking qualities as the old tower when it comes to counting the birds, because it was very important to the bird counters not to have a disturbance in the registration. They wanted to have similar conditions from before and after, so they wouldn't see changing in their number due to the fact that the structure changed. So we knew we had to accommodate this telescope, and we knew actually even down to the fact that they needed to have the same sweeping, be able to do the same sweeping angles with the telescope, because when you move the telescope, you lose count of where you are in counting a group of birds. So this is what gave us the shape of the tower and the size of the openings. It also meant that we couldn't do columns in the corner of the upper part of the structure, and that we had to open up all the way around. So all of the three sides of the top of the tower have sliding doors that you see here. And here you can see the tower in an open and closed position, and actually also the other door here can open, so the corner is completely open. So the tower is made from galvanized steel, which is very durable and well suited for the environment close by the coast. But this, of course, also means that it has to be galvanized, and all parts has to fit into a galvanization top, which is the top that you dip the black steel into. And this means that it has to be produced from smaller parts that are bolted together on site. So I'm going through the structure from top to bottom, even though it's of course assembled the other way around. But what holds the whole of the top of the tower together are the roof panels. And these three panels, they are bent, so they can be joined, but also this creates like a beam effect in the roof. And they go over the top of the structure and hold it together. So this is just a few images from the inside. So here you see the opening without corner columns. We have also these large glass panels which protect for the wind, so the wind doesn't move the telescope. And here because the telescope has to go into all corners of the tower, the hatch is also made from solid 10mm galvanized steel, which makes it very heavy. And in order to make it possible to open, we created this design, which is where it has a counterweight attached to the hinge that is below the floor plate. So when it's unlocked, it rises up into an upright position. Maybe it's easier to see in this drawing. So this is the counterweight that goes into the tower. And so this is the joint between two sections of the tower. So you see the sections, each part in the section is not joined with the next one, but they are joined horizontally. And then the joint is by the fact that these move across each other, they are joined horizontally. So here you see the sections stepping out. So basically the size of the top was given, and in an effort to get the building permit, we of course went for as small a figure as possible and tried to step in the figure. So it sort of becomes smaller in footprint, and at the same time we lowered the height, so the smallest footprint also has the lowest height, and by making them taller we could also have the same inclination on the stair going all the way through the structure. So here you see the elevation. And this gives us, this is a section in the joint between two sections. And by having this shift, the columns are not on top of each other. So this gave us the possibility of drilling a threaded hole into the columns that we could actually join the elements with the bolt directly screwed into the column. So this is one section where you can see also the stairs are made from 10mm steel, and they actually have the same structural quality as one of these diagonals connecting the inner and the outer structure. These are elements before coming back from the galvanization. So here you see a stair. And actually, so there's the load-bearing columns, which are the thicker columns here, which are 50mm and 65mm, and then there's the more slender columns, which are 22mm in diameter, and they are protecting so you don't fall out of the structure. So they are like security thing, but they also transferring the tensile forces of the structure from down through. So the wind, the force of the wind on the side of the tower is transferred with these into the foundation. So here is a few studies of laying down the welding in the material and galvanization. So when you're working with these massive steel profiles, you have the opportunity of using steel that doesn't have some of the materials in it that gives the galvanization this kind of pattern or texture that you may know from signposts or these kind of things. So this is one section being assembled, and a couple of the sections ground. And so, of course, it's all about precision when you're doing this kind of assembly that has to be brought to site. So and also because everything is galvanized, so you don't want to break the surface of the galvanization afterwards. So everything has to be very neatly fitted together on the factory. And it also has to match the foundation. And in order to do that, we created this template that we brought to the site to actually build the foundation from. And then we brought it back to the workshop. And we built the tower based on the template. So we knew that if it fitted to the template, it would also fit on site. And yeah, the last thing is that so the tower lands in the landscape just with this lower steel plate, so you don't see foundation or the connection to the foundation gravel. And in order to transfer the tensile forces, we have made this beam below the surface that transfers the power here into the joint to the foundation. So basically, this is the engineer's sketch. This is the foundation, which is like a circular disc, which is a typical way of doing foundation for a windmill, but of course on a smaller scale. And a few details. So basically here you see the tower in its entirety, and all of the elements of the structure, the stairs, the railings, even the handrail is all part of the structural system. And this is, of course, something that we decided to do because we wanted to have a very slender appearance of the tower, or fragile appearance of the tower. But what we didn't know was that this would actually also be something that we could feel in the material, so we could feel steel vibrating. So because you have the forces going through the structure, you can feel a vibration in the material. You can also, when it's windy, you can hear a sound of the wind going through the structure, sort of like a humming sound. And this we used for an exhibition where there was a sound artist who did an interpretation by attaching vibrational microphones to the structures, and then recording the vibrations and transferring it into the exhibition space by using vibrational speakers, which is speakers that you use for hearing disabled people, that were attached to the movable surfaces of the space. So those surfaces would be put into movement and then play the sound back to us. So the next project, Marienborg, is somehow something quite different, but maybe also a bit related. This is a piece of furniture we did for the Danish Prime Minister's residence, which is called Marienborg. This is this house from 1749, and basically this is a representational house that is used for having meetings with heads of other governments, and there was the furniture as a part of a larger refurbishment of the house, where a lot of different artists and some architects also contributed. And so it's the spaces that we have been working in are placed in the middle of the axis, and they are next to the large meeting room, which is here. This is a space which is used for if you want to have a more private setting, then you can go into the space. So it's in a way, it's an assignment which is somehow about creating a sensation, or being a part of creating this atmosphere of being in a home, but also, or actually more precisely, it's about creating an environment for decision making at the same time. So we wanted to make this, so basically it's a structure that is produced from simple rectangular brass pieces that was assembled by a local blacksmith. And basically here you see the idea that this is the structure is so it's in two spaces. We have one higher space and a lower space. This is first floor and second floor. They sort of speak together, and the shelvings are made with this 3-point screw joint, which is basically, let's see if I can find the image. So you see this detail here, where we can have one screw that sort of locks or makes it stable in all directions. And then we have this play that we wanted to have this very orderly structure at one time, and then at the same time we wanted it to be playful. And this we try to achieve by moving the columns on either the front or the back of the horizontal pieces. See here, there's one behind, and so whenever it's behind, it sort of also becomes a reason for parting or cutting the plate, which is a 2mm brass plate. So here you can see how it's divided. So this next project is called Nørrehus, and this is the first project that we completed in the office, and this is all about a low budget, all about having a low budget. So it's a transformation of a common courtyard in Nørrebro, in Copenhagen. And so basically we have housing going all the way around this courtyard. And this is how the courtyard looked before we changed it. So basically it was made with this asphalt areas, and they were in a very bad state. So the owners association, they had a plan to repair the asphalt, but the basic layout of the courtyard was based on the fact that that there needed to be room for a garbage truck going around and collecting garbage from all of the back entrances. But this function was no longer there, so all of the garbage cans were collected in this space and the garbage truck stops outside. So actually there was no need for this. So we suggested to the owners association that instead of spending a lot of money on repairing the asphalt, they should turn the courtyard around. And we convinced them that they could do it within the same budget to make a more green courtyard. So basically our task was to find a cheap way of removing asphalt. So we started by locating all of the sewage in the courtyard. So these are the red dots. And you see, so by not moving the sewage, we would bring down the cost of the project. And then the other thing is that we needed to have space for a lift going around to the facade, so that you can service the gutter and these kind of things. So that gave us a minimum distance from the facade. So we had an outer and an inner restriction, and then we started to do this curvature, and we took away all of the asphalt, which is marked by black. Then in order to, because by definition all soil in Copenhagen is considered to be mildly toxic, so it has to be put in a special place. So there's actually a cost connected to removing. So we built in all of the excess soil into the project and covered it with clean soil, and thus made these small hills around the edge. And then we replaced the sheds that were also in a bad condition and had to be replaced with an extension to the covered glass covering here that was already there. So just a few images of the process. So to make this easy for the contractor, we went to the site. This is my office partner, Sebastian, who is not here today, drawing the line for the contractor on the pavement. So this made it easy for them to cut. And also we left a small piece in the middle of that was not in a bad state. And we left it in the middle, so there would be like a surface for putting a table or something like this. And then we made pathways and cleaned up the vegetation. And here you see, this is, we wrapped this, because there was this glass covering already there that didn't have any sides, which meant that the garbage cans were visible, and also the smell was not encapsulated. So we put sides on this structure, and these are the mirroring plates you see here. And we made this espalier that sort of creates also a barrier and it reflects the vegetation. And then you see this, in here you can see the glass covering and the old steel structure. So this is a wrapping, and what happens here is this is a new structure on this side. So here you can basically see the plan. This is the new structure. This is the glass covering. This is the wrapping, the glass covering. And basically the idea here was also to make the project cheap. We wanted to in the beginning, the idea was to make this espalier thing, so it had the quality of something that belonged in the garden or in a garden setting. then we realized that by just mounting the covering plates on the inside of the load-bearing structure, we would have actually the expression from the structure sort of creating this sense of invisibility. Then, so sometimes the structure, and this is actually not structure, this is just a piece of invisibility. And also there was one space that had to be insulated for the person who takes care of the courtyard, his workshop. So here we put another layer of plywood on top of the structure and actually did on display. So it's sort of a play with an idea, and then we break it and go back to the whole idea, but we create a relation. So in a way we made, so the idea is that we make a structure that looks like an display, but then we sort of have to find a solution for the insulation, and then we do an display that looks like the construction. So these are the elevations, and a large roof light on the inside, another roof light in the pram space, and this is a space for sharing. So sharing the large furniture items, you can put them down, and somebody else might be able to use them, so they can take them up into their house. So the next project is called Bakketag, and this is sort of it's a special project in the sense that it's a reinterpretation of a historic cottage and shed, and this is in an area that has it's a protected landscape, so it's not under a building protection, but it's under an environmental protection. So the buildings are part of the landscape. This meant that the old structures we had to take down. They were completely fallen into decay, but we had to recreate the outer appearance as it was before. But we didn't have, so when you work with a protected building, you have the option of straying from the building code, but we didn't have this option here, so we couldn't recreate them in their actual state. We could, but we had to recreate the appearance. So this is sort of a strange situation to be in as an architect. This is, I'm going to tell you about how we approached this. So basically, these are historic images, the shed and the main house. Here you see, so basically the house as it was protected, it was sort of a collage of many generations of alterations. So originally it was these two log houses that were later joined and wrapped. So you would actually have like a board cladding on top of these log corners. There was a very famous Danish architect who built a fireplace, and also this chimney here is called Dessen. But basically we erected a new house, which is a timber frame structure with the fully insulated according to the building regulations. And yeah, just a few images. We did a few changes, so we added this. We got permission to add this roof chapel, which is a space so you can shower. So it's like showering, and this we thought connected nicely with the roof chapel of the shed down. Actually, these outer structures we stored, so we put them when we took down the building to each of these elements and stored so they could be recopied in the new structure. Basically, here you see the plan. So this is the fireplace. This we actually took apart the interior of it stone by stone and rebuilt as it was. But the rest is, as you see, is timber frame with the insulation. I think there's a section as well. And And for the roof, we used a load-bearing insulation, so that we could use put the load-bearing structure below the insulation. So this is an old image from the house as it was before. This is from the new interior. So the challenge here was to sort of recreate this sensation of the old house, but of course in a brighter way. And if you imagine this, the original house had this. It was built over many times, so it had this collage-like feeling. And this is the old staircase and the new staircase. We wanted to open up in between the spaces, but also keep them defined. We wanted to have this collage quality, and we tried to achieve this by working with the painted surfaces that sort of mark the different functions in the spaces. So, for instance, here we have the shift here, and and here you see the load-bearing structure that is exposed, and we have the boards here, and then we have the wooden fiber insulation on top that is actually carrying the weight. So this is an example. So if we have this sleeping alcove on the first floor, and of course it was already a very small house. But we had to add the insulation, so the ceiling height became lower, and to compensate for that, we made the floor so it's only it's actually this is the side of the bed is the beam that is carrying the floor. So this carries the mattress, but it also carries the floors. Basically, you see these boards are the same boards as these boards. This is the space below. This is the kitchen. Again, you see this change in color of the tiles. So we have brown tiles and blue tiles, just emphasizing that there's a transition between one space and another space. And here, this is the shower that we saw from outside. Again, here there's this also a structural element that is the beam in the roof chapel is actually hanging from the beams that are supporting this beam is within the insulation in here, but this is the structural beam that carries the sort of the chapel. And so just a few words about the shed. So the shed is actually more of a reconstruction, but originally the shed was two sheds. So first shed was this part here, and then later this part with the roof chapel was built. And it was built with a roof construction that meant that it was not possible to stand up inside. So we made a different roof structure like this with a beam in the middle and a column that emphasizes the place where the first original shed ended, and also the top of the foundation of the original first shed. Okay, so the next project is a project that wasn't built. This is the Sydney Opera Pavilion, which is a project that we were asked to do by the Utzon Center, and this was for the celebration of the 100-year anniversary of Jørgen Utzon, and for the 45th year anniversary of the Sydney Opera House. So this was supposed to be a temporary structure placed on the Western Boardwalk in front of the Sydney Opera House for the celebration days, and it was supposed to be an exhibition space. So just to understand the idea behind the project, I have to tell a bit about Johansen. So Johansen, he was an architect who took inspiration from natural elements and also from travels, from cultural observations, and he sort of interpreted them and built them into his project. And just to give you a bit of background about the Sydney Opera, I think there's probably most of you already know this, but if you don't, it needs to be said. So Jan Utzon, he was commissioned to do he won the competition to do the Sydney Opera House, and he worked on it, but he was let go of the project at a point where he had erected the plinth and the shells, the big shells, concrete shell structures, but he had not built the interior at that point where he left the project. And he didn't build, for instance, the large auditoriums inside. But he had some quite wonderful ideas for this. And this is where we take our approach for this project. So he was studying the waves, because at this time when he was building the opera house, there was couldn't render the sound of the space like we can today. So it was much more reliant on intuition. And Utzon, he was watching the waves and watching the way that the light would reflect on the curvature of the waves, and decided that this would be good shapes for doing an acoustic space. And so he transformed this observation into a structural system, which is you see here as a study of these wedge-shaped pieces. So these are very large plywood structures that are wedge-shaped and joined together to create a space. So this is like half the space of the major hall. And these are the color schemes for, so this is day for the major hall and night for the minor hall. And here you see, at the point that he was leaving the project, he was working on the design for these auditoriums. And this is one of the drawings that we found in the archive. And the idea was to make these beams that are created from huge plywood plates. So this is a continuous plywood plate going from here to here, which was one manufacturer that could do at that time. And they have been joined by steel frames, and the steel frames would have been suspended from the concrete shells. So it's quite a special kind of structure, quite fascinating. So, but at the time, he was trying to also to get a mock-up made of one of these elements, but he didn't succeed in that. So our idea was to take one of these elements. So we took especially one from the minor hall, and we did a recreation of that here, 1-to-1 was the intention. And then we adapted the size slightly. So took this shape, so it would be tall enough to enter. And then we put it on the side on Western Boardwalk. And then we started to think about how to build it. And obviously now we didn't have the same issues, the same structural issues. So the idea was to do it from standard plywood plates that would overlap. And here you see some images of the structure on Western Boardwalk, with how it creates spaces with the opera house on the other side here. And we left openings in it so it would be possible to enter, and also to accommodate the flow of the boardwalk. And we used the color scheme of the minor hall. And this, you see how it creates a space with the harbor. So the next project is it's actually close to the first project I showed. This is called Skjern, and this is a conversion of 3 pump stations. So basically, I think this Skjern is one of the largest rivers in Denmark, and it has a special story because in the 60s, the last 25 kilometers of the river was strained out in order to reclaim farmland. So this is an image from the 60s, the straight canal. But this was really bad for the water quality of Ringkøbing Fjord, and at the same time, even the agricultural areas that it created showed up to be not of very high quality. So it was decided to. So this is the largest land reclamation project in Danish history at the time. But shortly after, it was decided that we had to go back to the old run of the river. And so this was a large project, and it was completed in 2002. The river is back to its old run. Like this, you see the trace of the strained river here, but the pump stations were kept because they were still draining the water from some of the farming area. And by doing this large natural space, there was a lot of wildlife coming to the area, and suddenly also a lot of visitors coming to visit the area. And for this, the municipality needed facilities for the visitors. So we were asked to transform the pump stations into visitors' facilities. And they were actually still working, but they were. So this is what they looked like at the time. So they are very closed off. And here you see under the construction. So what we found fascinating was this relief, or as an interesting starting point. And did a lot of surveys measuring the buildings on site. And this is a drawing from measuring the relief. And here you see there's a new structure which is based on the relief on top of the old concrete structure. And the idea of doing this was by adding these new elements to the roof and next to the buildings, we wanted to have like a seamless connection between new and old. So we will still only have one element. And this is, of course, this balance of doing an intervention in a landscape is also for Tipperne is about how to avoid disturbing the experience of the landscape. By doing the additions like this, we sort of had this feeling that we could allow the visitors maybe not to recognize the presence of the structure, or just recognize it as one thing, but still maybe have the sense that something had altered, and also maybe that the massive character of the concrete structures, there's this interplay between the new light structure and the old structure that sort of balances out this heaviness. This was the intention, at least. So this also we wanted to strengthen the proportions of the buildings. So for this building, this is Pump Station East, another one of them. We wanted to make it slightly taller. There was something about the figure that believed needed that. And something that was quite recognizable for the pump stations is the fact that they are gray on one side and they have the red brick on the other side. So when you're moving through this landscape, you're sort of maybe it's a bit hard to really know exactly where you are, because it's somehow a bit the same. And you have sort of bushes that are making it a bit hard to really know exactly where you are. But these houses, they sort of tell you at least that you are moving, because the color changes depending on your viewing angle. This we found quite fascinating, so we wanted to adopt this into the new structures. And but we wanted it to have sort of a different way of also reacting to movement. And this we did by on selected places painting the sides of the wood in a bright red-orange color that would become very intense when you see it over an angle, and then it would disappear when you see it from the front. And this we also brought inside the structures to sort of break this very strong presence of the wooden surfaces, to take the attention away from. So here you see these old structures. They are like they are sort of set into the ground with the underground water chain. This is Pump Station East, and here we did. Oh, sorry, Pump Station South, and here we did the extension on the side. This was basically because the structure, this pump station is quite close to the river. It's just outside here, so we didn't really have the need for getting up so high. Then we encapsulated the high voltage installations on the side here, and made access to the pump station from the side. So here you can see that you can access up here, and you have a viewing platform. You can also access into the pump station. This is a ground floor plan of Pump Station North before it was transformed. This is after, so basically we fitted a lift and handicap toilet and a new staircase, which is sort of kept within the footprint of the old pump station. And we gave access to the pump halls from here, so the pump halls were changed into exhibition spaces. And here, this is the pump hall of Pump Station North. We built these wooden panel walls to cover the instruments. So these instruments you see here, they are for adjusting the water levels. So this is not something that you want visitors to touch. So this is why we needed these coverings. You see the section in Pump Station North. And basically, this is the old pump. This was moved into this area. So these spaces were actually not in function. Only when the pumps needed servicing, they would have to be transported up here and out through this gate. So basically, because the pump halls were very closed off from the exterior, we fitted windows into the windows that can open into the openings of the gates, and then we left the gates open, so you would have a view towards the river from here, and still have the option of taking out the pump. So basically, also this is like something that a blacksmith just put together like this, and we use this special kind of glass, which is very durable, and which is actually keeping the frame rigid. And in a certain place in Pump Station North, we couldn't use these wooden details because it was next to the high voltage space. So we used these aerated concrete blocks to make the walls. This is a very fragile material, and somehow it's not really present anywhere else in the pump stations, but we thought there was something about their character that was suitable for using. So we wanted to keep them visible. Normally you would plaster these kinds of walls. But this, of course, has the challenge that they easily are broken. So we made these details on the corners with massive concrete blocks. So this floor is a floor, and there's a basement below. So we could not put anything heavy on that. And so we covered it in a very thin paint with a bit of gray in it, so it would just seem a bit more finished. So here you see this is cutting the hole through the roof for the staircase. The staircase sort of shifts from geometry of the existing building to the geometry of the addition. So it sort of shifts into these diagonals. And these are fiberglass ends. So basically, yes. So the geometry of the roof structure is diagonal. This is, of course, to create a series of spaces. So when you come up, that you're not just exposed to the view 360 degrees, but you have these different spaces that you can move between and get frame views and go into a space where you have the fields and one where you have the river, to sort of extend the experience of viewing the landscape. And at the same time, this was also a way of sort of extending the corners of the original building without making something that was as large as the original building. And basically, the structure is there's no substructure. This is the load-bearing structure is actually the relief is carrying the roof. So here's a few details. Here you can see the plan. Pump station north with the spaces that you can go around here, go into here, and there's a smaller space here next to the lift. And this structure creates these framings of different views into the landscape. This. I'm just having a look, and I already spent 1 hour. So actually, I think I'm just going to go. I'm just going to go quickly across this one. This is a fun little story. This is a contribution for Alternative Histories, which was an exhibition which was curated by Drawing Matter and the Architecture Foundation in London. And we were asked to reimagine this sketch by Peter Merkel, which is called 1226. And to us, this looked like an elevation with an enclosed space in the top, with an opening and sort of with a layered space behind, and then with some kind of column that was carrying the structure. But somehow we thought these columns looked too slender, so we tried to imagine if they could be walls instead, so that it would be the end of the walls. So the idea for the study was that to create inner load-bearing walls that carry cantilevering outer walls. So this would be the walls here, and these are plan sections going on through the structure. So here you have the higher cantilevering walls and you have these openings in the walls, so you get sort of this layered space from the sketch. And we decided that we wanted to do it from aerated concrete blocks in scale 1 to 20. So we took aerated concrete blocks and cut them to 20 millimeter tall blocks. And we did our calculation mistake. So we thought we needed 200 blocks, but it turned out we needed 700. So maybe we would have made another choice of material if we had known. This is in. And also because this was sort of like a fun little exercise and it would not turn into a build project, we knew, of course. So we wanted the model to sort of represent something one-to-one, that it was sort of finished in itself. And we used the same mortar that you would use for actually gluing this material in full scale. And we built the model upside down. So we have this heavy cantilevering outer walls, and we needed the mortar to be dry to keep it stable. And then we flipped it around. So these are just a few images of the model being upside down, because we found that it was actually quite fascinating. This. You see the Peter Merkel sketch upside down here. So basically the idea is that the inner walls are load-bearing and they carry the cantilevering outer walls. But when it's bonded, we didn't want to have too many bonds between the inner and the outer wall, because that would weaken the strength of the outer wall. And to avoid this, let's see if I can find an appropriate image. I think maybe here it's visible. So we had for each wall, one side of the wall would go below the outer wall, and this, when it goes below, it would be allowed to have one bonding. So this has the bonding on top, and the other wall would only go to the inside of the cantilevering wall, but then it have two bondings. So there's a bonding here and a bonding here. So here, see a few more images. Basically, this is the sketch, and it's completely the same proportions as the sketch. And you see the columns or the walls here. And then if this was taken from a bit further away, then you see that this is the wall that goes to the back of the cantilevering wall, and this is the one that extends below. So this also makes the difference from the walls that you look straight on and those you look onto the side of. Okay, and so finally, now I'm pushing the limit, I think, so I'm just going to flip this. This is a project which is underway. This is a combined warehouse and office building in Køge outside Copenhagen. It's in between the hospital and transportation center, and it's on this more or less triangular plot with the highway out here, and this is offices for medical equipment, plastic equipment that is housed in this warehouse. There's the sales department for selling the material, and then this is a large sorry. So the organization is a large international organization which is owned by it has Danish owners. So the owners of the larger company, they are located here. So this is the floor plan, and basically we knew this had to be prefabricated concrete elements to keep a stable temperature in the warehouse. And so we took this as like a challenge to do the whole thing in precast concrete elements and sort of to work with the expression of that. See these images are building. This is basically, I think they are a few weeks old, these images. And these are images from the casting process. So basically you have this big table with, and we used plywood plates to sort of make a relief in the surface, and used what's called a retarder, which is a solution that you put on top of these plates so the concrete doesn't dry up these surfaces. So when you take them out of the shapes, then you can wash them down, and then you expose the rock and the concrete. This is a courtyard, finished. The few model studies corner. This is one of the spaces, a plan of the lighting fixtures. And here you see, so you have to build in a lot of ventilation and technical equipment into these kinds of spaces. And we sort of try to do a combination where we sort of make we have like a load-bearing column here in the corner, but then we have these boxes for the ventilation that sort of emulates being structured, but also in the end will also be clearly not structured. Few images. So this is also construction site image in almost same position model image. We work with these large roof lights. This is from the warehouse, and it's still the elements are not cast together, so they are supported by this. Yeah, so basically we wanted to have this somehow relate to this the qualities of these warehouses and structures that you see in these transportation areas, and this roughness, but also so this is the warehouse. The surfaces are basically going to be like this, of course, without these supporting pieces. Yeah, I think that was that. And also we have a book out, just a bit of advertisement, Tunda free, should be possible to buy in stores. I think that's all. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Søren, for this lecture and for this deep insight into 7 very different projects. We can continue for a little bit longer, and I was told by Julian, our technical support, that there is the opportunity to ask some questions from the audience if they're typed through via YouTube. So it would be nice if there was a little bit of exchange, despite the format that we have. And maybe while we're waiting, I can also add a few general infos. Maybe to start with, we had originally planned to visit you in Copenhagen with our unit, and it's unfortunate, of course, that this hasn't happened, but on the other hand, I'm now glad that you came here to Hanover, to a much larger audience, to show your project. So thanks for that. And also in that context, I'd like to thank the initiative of Hilde Leon, our dean, who made it possible to organize this lecture series, and the Faculty of Architecture and Landscape of Hanover put together 8 fantastic lectures in total, which we will now have every Tuesday at 7, easily accessible via YouTube. Tonight, each of them very different positions, so please turn on again the following weeks. But in that context, also generally to me, it looks like you both enjoy a culture of participating in debate, and maybe that's also because you both graduated and you both currently teach in Copenhagen at the Royal Danish Academy. That's interesting to know. So you develop practice and teaching in parallel, but also you participate in a large number of exhibitions, and you have shown the alternative histories model and process. So a little info to the side of that, this show will now soon be in Dublin, has been a little bit postponed. So if you make it there, please do go, or otherwise come and see the online version on Drawing Matter. But you do give a number of lectures, and I think it's remarkable that this morning you have been in Lausanne at the EPFL with your tailleur. So even more, we're happy that tonight you're joining us in Hanover. I'm looking at my tablet here. If some questions come through, whichever way you can reach me, please do so. But otherwise, I'll start with my observations. To me, it seems like there is a real interest in one-to-one scale. And also looking at your presentation, it's quite special that you show many detailed drawings and sketches, and that there's a deep connection between the one-to-one thinking from the start in material and how things are joined and how things are made, and how this has now turned into reality. So maybe you can tell us a little bit on how you're working, on what importance that one-to-one scale has, and working so closely with material and construction processes.
Yes, I think this is one thing that we always try to do. So we want to learn about. We want to sort of ground our project in a way of building. So we try to identify. So with for instance, the production facility, or with Codan, the last project that I showed, the Køge project, the prefab concrete elements. This gives us a possibility to sort of take the manufacturing process and learn how it's done, and then implement it into the design process. So this is something that is very important to us. So early in the design, we are visiting factories and workshops and places just to learn. This is the limitations. For the concrete elements, they can never be taller than 4.1 meters, because they have to be able to go under the bridges, and they are made on tables. And maybe one factory has one table that has a certain size, and another factory has another table, and one factory has extended their table and does have a welding line on the elements. So all of these details, I think, is very giving to know, to sort of I think to make it a foundation for the design. So this also, so the concrete house becomes very much a concrete house, the steel structure very much a steel structure, and the wooden cabin becomes like sort of a bit of an exploration of wooden details. I think that is something that is common throughout our projects.
And you managed to make those links even with a drawing. So there's this one-to-one reality of Peter Merkley's drawing, that with some kind of obsession of cutting concrete blocks into 700 pieces, you translate into a new one-to-one reality, and both are linked through the drawing. But this is also a project that is not an abstraction of a larger scale thing. It is really developed from an assembly process also.
This is the whole idea. Is, I think the idea is that it's not really finished until it's built. So the thing is, when we get this assignment to do an interpretation of a sketch into a model, then we somehow have to make the model the finished product. So there shouldn't be a next step to the model. So this is exactly. It's sort of the same ambition of sort of completing things.
I'm looking at my tablet for questions, but otherwise I continue for a little bit more. What I really like about your projects is that they're, as a body of work, they're a bit difficult to grasp, and maybe compared to other, and maybe especially younger offices, there's not the big temptation to develop a signature style, a Johansen Skovsted style, and it's each of these building processes or each of these situations, they nourish the process, and you seem to enjoy the parameters of each context to reach out to that, to connect it to something particular, and to give each project its own space and its own nature, and to develop those independently. For me, that is a real quality, and I think it was very nice to see them tonight in a series, and how different they are. But there are, of course, interests and threads and attitudes shining through, and to me one is about observing landscape, but this attitude towards landscape for me is never sentimental. It's never about a traditional genius loci idea. It's more about translating an observation into a new reality. Maybe you can explain that relationship to site and place and context and landscape.
Yes. I think when it comes to the two projects in the landscape, Tipperne and Skærno, I think it's also a matter of sort of understanding or trying to comprehend, the purpose of what we are doing, because those places are first and foremost, they carry the quality through the experience of the landscape. So you don't want to disturb the feeling of the landscape on other sides. So on Tipperne, there's this somehow there's this fragility of the landscape, but also there's something which is has kind of I think some kind of sublime quality, which means you can feel sort of so an easy way to explain is this quality that the experience of the landscape can make you feel sort of humbled. But if you inject sort of architecture into that, in a sense where you sort of point to the fact that there has been taken care of your experience of the landscape, then you undermine also, I think, this sensation of your own fragility in the relationship to the landscape. So I think this was very important for these projects, that not to disturb that sensation, and also to make it like for Tipperne, for these instruments, it was very important that you could sort of maybe think that it was something that was made by the bird counters, and that it didn't immediately appear as some kind of architectural gesture necessarily.
I'm still looking at my tablet, but I'm also happy to continue for a little bit longer. I think there's this quality of looseness in your work that is tied back to experience, and things can change. And although they have a structural integrity and an interest in structure, they're not determined, and they can change and transform. And maybe that moment of transforming and transformation is most ambiguous and shifting in the two red cabins that you reconstructed, and that's a really intriguing project, and it looks so effortless when you see it now as a collage. But looking through the process of designing it, was that difficult? I'm sure there were some things that you really liked, but maybe were there also some areas where you felt uncomfortable with the windows, which are still some sort of taboo here in Germany, to build those with the little panes of glass and white profiles in between? And how did you develop that collage in the process of designing?
Yeah, so in a way, it's it's like really, the taboo, I think is the right word. I think it's a hard project to talk about because it's somehow I need to explain that it had to be like that, because I would never make the choice of recreating this collage, even though it maybe would also have been the right way to do things, because it's the owner is also, she was a child and grew up in the house, and it was very much about the memories of the house. So in a way, I think the final project is just the way I think it was in many ways the right solution for her. So yeah, I agree that it's. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but somehow it's. We were given the conditions, and of course we did it as the way it had to be done, and then we had our time on the inside, and had some sort of negotiated our way through each space, trying to make relationships to the old, and yeah.
No, it works very well because it's so rich and it feels layered, although it has been built in one particular moment only. And I think the way you layer the constructions with paint and with a primary and a secondary structure gives it more richness than usual projects, and in that way transcends the idea of an old project into a more compressed sensation of time. So I think that's very nice. Julian, have you received any questions? Otherwise, maybe I don't want to miss anyone. But we could otherwise come to an end slowly. And yeah, once again, Søren, thanks for coming to Hanover. And as a quick announcement, we continue next week with Ulrich Müller from Architekturgalerie in Berlin. And he will talk about the display and communication of architecture. So surely that will be an interesting talk, which you'll find on our website. Now, I see that there are comments on YouTube, on which I do not find in the comment section. I'm a bit struggling to find this, Julian. Oh, I don't know if Søren can see it.
I cannot see the questions. Maybe, Julian, if you can paste the comments into...
or can you read them out, Julian?
Maybe that could also be a possibility. Yeah, I saw it. If we also work on architecture competitions. And yes, we do architecture competitions, but we have been lucky to have project assignments from the beginning that were actually going to be completed, or had the funding and everything lined up. So we have sort of tried to focus much of our energy on developing these projects, and we have also been doing competitions on the side, but it's not like it's not a very central part of what we have been doing since we founded the office. It might be something that happens in the future, but the thing is that we like we like this this feeling of being able to follow a project and to go into construction and to see it become something. And doing a competition, there's a very long, often a very long process in front of you. Sometimes you have to await financing. You might have to make changes in what's that called? But there might be a long process that means that either somehow the projects don't become realized. And so in that way, we prefer to work with projects that we can we can see a path forward.
There's another question by Jonas, who would like to know more about the working conditions and what you think about the working conditions of offices around Europe. Jonas, maybe is that directed? Maybe you can start talking about the conditions that you find particular in Copenhagen and Denmark, or maybe you can compare that.
So Bernd, we had a talk. We talked together yesterday about the conditions in Germany, and having heard about some of the issues or challenges you have in Germany, I believe that our conditions are quite good here, and we also have some of the problems that you see throughout Europe, where it's quite difficult for smaller or new offices to actually gain access to projects of a certain size. So it's possible to do like these small things that a larger office wouldn't touch, like the Tipperne project or the pump stations, because these and so. But if you want the scale of projects that sort of also carries an economy, it's quite difficult if you haven't already been doing projects of that size also in Denmark.
But that scale of your projects also has an advantage, or allows you to be more in control of things. So
exactly,
and that seems to be important for you as well.
Yeah, this is also this is something that we really try to this is something we want from our project, is that we have the possibility of having control throughout the phases. I realize that it's not always the way things are, but I think we have been lucky that we have had projects where we have had the possibility of keeping control throughout the construction phase until delivering the final project.
Okay, those are the ones that I can see in the chat right now. If there aren't any others, we conclude this evening and nice start of our lecture series. Do look on our website for more information. And thank you, Søren, once again. We stay for a little bit longer in our room to round it off. And everyone else, we hope to welcome back next week, Tuesday at 7. Okay, thank you. Bye.